Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Tim Loringer, and I'm a senior partner at Wisner Baum. On behalf of our entire team, I want to express our heartfelt sympathies to all of you affected by the devastating fires. Today's meeting is about providing you with practical information to protect your rights, navigate insurance claims, and avoid predatory practices. Our goal is to ensure that you feel supported and informed, and as you begin to rebuild. If you have any questions, there will be a question and answer session after the presentation. If you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A box, chat box, and then we will do our best to get to those questions during the presentation or right after. My colleague and law partner, Ari Friedman, will be leading the presentation. His experience and insights will be invaluable as you face the challenges ahead. Thank you again for joining us. I'll turn it over to Ari to get started.
Okay, Tim, thank you very much. Everybody, welcome. Just know from all of us, we can only imagine the range of emotions you're going through right now. And as we've watched these communities get affected by these wildfires, we've collectively noticed that there's been a lot of noise out there, a lot of really concerning information that's being put into the community. So we wanted to take the time to bring some experience and insight to what you're going through, and hopefully give you some guidance and support that's going to guide you through this immediate recovery process, dealing with your insurance and how to proceed moving forward. So just as a brief overview, we are going to talk about insurance. I'm going to then spend a little bit talking about some assistance measures, FEMA, what's coming through our state and national governments. I'm then going to touch on some very common issues that I've seen coming out of wildfires before, things I've learned interacting with people who were affected by wildfires. And then at the end, we'll revisit and touch briefly on what we know about these fires and what the future may hold. So let's just start off the bat. If you're insured, you probably have a declarations page in your policy. I'm not going to do a deep dive in insurance today because really my focus is more on the immediacy that you're facing right now. There are a lot of provisions that may exist in a policy that might come into play during a rebuild, extended replacement coverage, for example, code upgrades. Instead, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the more common things you're going to deal with. That's going to be starting with coverage A, your dwelling. This is the portion of your policy that just covers your main structure and anything that's attached to it. Built-in garages, porches, built-in appliances. Generally, it's anything that's part of that structure where if you were to move, for example, you couldn't take with you. The coverage A typically is going to be broken down into actual cash value. That means it's fair market value, essentially the value of the home at the time of loss. So what that means is if you have an older home, and depreciation has to be factored in, and that coverage is only going to be applicable up to the policy limits. So if you're underinsured or concerned about whether or not there's enough money to rebuild, that's a viable concern that you might have. But just understand, you might have also a replacement cost value. It's a little bit rarer of a policy. It's usually more expensive. If you have this type of policy, understand the insurance company may only offer you the actual cash value until time of rebuild. There's ways that they can withhold the funds until that time they see that those additional monies can come into play. But again, you're in a situation dealing with your policy limits. So if you have a $500,000 limit on coverage A, that's generally, absent any rider, is going to be the limit of what your insurance company will pay out. We can come down, like I said, to talk a little bit about extended replacement costs, code upgrade. Those will come into play down the line. But if you have those policies, please be aware, please keep them in mind, because they are additional sources of money that you can draw on. Coverage B is the other structures. Everything else that's not attached to your main structure, but is affixed to the land. So if you've got fences, standalone garages, guest or pool houses, sheds built on foundations, you can see the list here. Typically, it's a percentage of coverage A. Same thing, it's valued ACV versus replacement cost value. The one thing I will say is that as you go back to your property and you're photographing it and you're looking at it, pay special attention to any fencing, any gates. A lot of these things, maybe they're built with concrete, maybe they're metal. They may look like they're sound, but they may not be. And you really want to make sure you're giving those items a special review in the instance of a total loss, just because what most people don't realize is heat can really damage the concrete, heat can damage the metal, and it might look okay now, it might be okay now, but when the rains come and a year passes, suddenly you start developing problems with these fences. You go to your insurance company and they try to say it's not fire related, and you run into problems getting those things attributed to the insurance claim from the fire. Finally, coverage C, personal property. Again, this is going to be everything that's not nailed down. It doesn't matter where it is on the property. If you've got something in a shed, if you've got something in a kitchen, it's all considered personal property. We need to spend a moment talking a little bit about this, because this is going to be in a big area that's going to affect a lot of you right now. Under the law, the insurance company has to give you, I believe, 30% of the value of your coverage A to be deducted or taken against coverage C, meaning they have to pay you 30% of your coverage A value in personal property automatically in times of disaster. So if you've contacted your insurance company, you've let them know there's a total loss, you should ask for and expect that kind of money. When it comes to personal property, again, depreciation will be factored in. So you need to keep that in mind after you get your payment and you have to build an inventory list. You have to factor in depreciation. You have to consider what that rate may be. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how to approach your personal property inventory in a moment, because it can be overwhelming. And in talking with people I've represented in the past, it's one of the most difficult aspects of the recovery process, because all that emotional toll it takes to sit down and have to write everything that was lost is like revisiting everything that was lost all over again. Be mindful of sublimits, jewelry, art. You might have special additional coverages for certain things. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your personal property. I think one of the most common questions that we've been fielding since these fires began is, how do I go about making an inventory list? Obviously, photos and videos are great, offer great insight to things that were there. But I've found, and I've used many times in the past, a spreadsheet. This spreadsheet it's taken from basically United Policyholders website. They are a nonprofit that focuses mostly on helping disaster victims deal with their insurance company. They are a great resource. We will talk a little bit about them in the future. But this is a spreadsheet I have. I'm happy to send it to anybody that wants it. We can make it available through this presentation. This is just a short little truncated view of it, but you can see here, it's a spreadsheet that sort of goes room by room, and it covers hundreds of typical items that you may encounter in a home. So that way you're not necessarily recreating something from scratch, trying to remember everything that was in a drawer. You can say, oh yes, I had toothbrushes and toothpastes and tweezers, and you can start marking and filling this in to create your inventory list. There's a couple things you need to keep in mind. A lot of people will create the inventory list up until the value of their policy. So if they have a $200,000 personal property policy limit, they're going to fill this out, they're going to hit 200,000, and then they're going to walk away. I would encourage you now, I want to put it out there now. I know how difficult it is. I've worked with so many people who struggle with this, but please try to do a full accounting of your inventory. And the reason is, if there's any litigation that results from these fires sometime down the line, that full inventory list will help you in that litigation. because the litigation is going to cover the difference between what your insurance pays and what your actual loss is. And as difficult as it might be now, it's going to be even harder if you try to do this 3 or 4 years from now inside of the context of a litigation. So just a little tip to keep that in mind when you're going through this. Finally, what many of you are probably dealing with right now is coverage D, loss of use or additional living expenses. There are various ways this policy can be phrased, but generally it's going to give you money for your immediate living needs. Keep in mind, you can definitely support creative housing options. Over this weekend, I had some people over at my house who were displaced from the Eaton fire, and they were staying at a friend's house. And they asked me, can they charge some type of fair rental value for that arrangement? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. And you could submit that to your insurance company for reimbursement. Generally speaking, though, absent any type of emergency payment that's been made that will be credited against ALE, again, your insurance company is required to give you, I believe, 4 months of ALE payments immediately after a disaster just to help you get resituated. After that point, you're going to need to front all the money and then seek reimbursement through your insurance company unless you work something out with them. But generally, it's going to require you to take photos, document all your expenses, and submit that for reimbursement. Again, keep in mind any policy limits that might be in play. So let's now shift a little bit to something that everyone will be dealing with very soon, and that is debris removal. And there are some tips and tricks with this that I just want to start putting out into the community because there's a lot to consider here. A lot of policies will have a portion of their policy set aside for debris removal. And keep in mind, President Biden, right after these fires started, did agree that the full cost of debris removal would be covered for the next 6 months. What that means and what we've seen in other fires is that the county and the state are going to get together with the federal help, and they're going to come through and they're going to offer a quote unquote free debris removal for everyone. What that means is they will come do it at your lot. But if you have any insurance money for debris removal, they're going to take that insurance money from debris removal. If you have no insurance, they're still going to scrape your lot. There's just nothing for them to draw on. You are, as a homeowner, required to clean up your lot. It is not necessarily required that you accept or use or are forced into this county program. And when we talk about that, the tension I've seen is if you sign up for the county program, understand there is an element that you're giving away control of what they can do. They're going to show up. They're going to decide what gets removed. They're going to decide what doesn't need to be removed. Maybe you'll be able to negotiate with them if you catch them when they're there. Maybe not. I would not count on it. And the concern is that two things. Maybe you're looking down, you've had someone out to the property, they look at a retaining wall and they say, you know what, I've inspected it, that retaining wall, that staircase, this gate, it can stay. It's actually in salvageable condition. The county comes through, they say, nope, it's got to go, and they pull it off. So that's a danger you need to consider. Another element about scraping the lot is many policies have a tree and vegetation portion. In any litigation, the tree and vegetation portion will be part of your claim. When they scrape the lot, if you haven't documented that evidence on the lot of your burnt down trees, of your shrubbery, of your gardens, whatever was there, it can be really hard to recreate that down the line. So if you're going to opt into the county program, make sure you've documented all of the land. You might think a burnt down tree doesn't hold any value, but it does. Make sure you've got the videos, you've got the photos. If you're in a position to get someone out there to actually do the documenting for you, like an arborist, even better. But just understand when they scrape that lot, all that's going to be gone. I would encourage you to get a bid. You can go out into the market, you can work with debris removal contractors, look at your insurance policy, and then work with them privately rather than opting into the county program. Just understand that there are things on that lot that might hold value that might not become apparent until months or years down the line. So that's a sort of down and dirty view of what sort of insurance issues you're going to be dealing with right now. If you haven't opened your claim, you should. Insurance companies are required to respond to you timely. I believe it's 2 weeks, 15 days. If you can't get through, keep trying. Make sure if you are total loss, make sure you let them know right out the gate you have a total loss. Even better if you can send them a photo, just because there are obligations and responsibilities the insurance company has once they learn of the extent of your loss. And hopefully that will make them pay the value of your policy a lot quicker than hemming and hawing over getting an adjuster out to see it just because you just opened a claim and said loss. So shifting gears here, we're going to talk about some assistance that's available. I'm sure everyone, if you don't know, FEMA assistance has been available. They have an initial payment that everyone can get. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's really meant for those emergency immediate supplies that people need just to survive the next few days. The SBA loans are going to become available. They are not just for businesses. They are for anyone who's been affected by these disasters. And typically, if you're underinsured, an SBA loan is going to be where you're going to look to, at least in the immediate short term, as a source of money that can help you bridge the gap between what your insurance pays out and what your rebuild costs might be. Unsurprisingly, with the amount of devastation we've seen here, building costs are going to go up. Building materials are going to be in increased demand. And I've already heard from many people about the spikes in rentals, the spikes in costs of goods going up. So just keep in mind, someone who might be adequately insured, just having a one-off loss might not necessarily experience the spike in prices and costs. But when an entire community starts getting affected, those initial policies just aren't sufficient to keep up with all the rising costs. Governor Newsom issued an executive order, N425. Anyone who's been through the wildfire process knows that the permitting can be a long and drawn out process. And nothing is more frustrating than getting to the point of being able to start to rebuild, and then you're just stuck waiting month after month for your permits. We haven't actually seen how this is going to manifest itself, but it did seem to be that there's an awareness by Governor Newsom that the permitting process is an issue. So hopefully that will bring some expediency to the situation. Like I mentioned before, United Policyholders, again, it's a tremendous resource. It's a nonprofit designed to help those policyholders interact with their insurance company. Their website has a lot of helpful information. It can be dense at times because like I said, there's a lot. Please bookmark that website. Please refer to it. They have wonderful materials. If they happen to do a presentation in any community, try to make a note to show up because you're going to learn a lot, and they're always very helpful. And then finally, Mutual Aid LA has done a wonderful job, in my opinion, of aggregating all sorts of different relief and support organizations, talking about from a variety of perspectives, from pet support to supplies to clothing to housing. The California Insurance Commissioner is offering 2 workshops later this month. The first one starting at Santa Monica College. The second one is at Pasadena City College. I have flyers for that. I've just taken them from the website to distribute. You will need to make an appointment per their website. But again, if you're looking for additional insurance support and help, aid, and guidance, that's another resource that you should be aware of, and I encourage you to take advantage of. So let's talk about some of these common issues that we've just seen dealing with these wildfires time and time again. The first thing is going back to the site of the burn down, site of the affected area. Please keep in mind there's a lot of hazardous debris, asbestos, lead, arsenic are going to be possibly contaminating a lot. We all know what an N95 mask is. Personally, I use a P100, which I think my wife has co-opted for herself, but feel free to get a mask. I like it a little bit more robust than the N95. When you're going through that, when you return, take photos, take videos, get those to your insurance carrier as soon as possible. This is something that actually motivated this presentation. As attorneys, I'm the guy that comes in to sue people. We're litigators here. Obviously, we're looking at SCE, we're looking at DWP. But the one thing we've all noticed, not only in our firm, but talking to our brothers and sisters who do this work as well, that it seems like there's a lot of opportunities descending into these communities. And some of the more common ways I've seen this in the past have been cleaners and vendors and people going door to door. People who are suffering smoke damage, for example, might find someone ringing their doorbell saying, hey, we will clean your house. You just have to sign over your insurance money for house cleaning to us. And they go about offering that service, and it sounds great. But the problem is those unsolicited vendors, in my experience, cause more problems than they solve because they don't really do an adequate job cleaning. They take a big chunk of insurance money, and then the homeowner has to then go back and either go out of pocket to finish the cleaning or deal with the whole situation, and it's just a headache. So just keep in mind, if you are in that situation, if you are dealing with someone, do your due diligence, make sure you're vetting them properly, make sure that they are, if appropriate, licensed and bonded, they have experience in this area, and just be suspicious of anyone kind of knocking on your door, offering to do something for you. One of the most hot button issues right now is, what do I do if I have problems with my insurance? And I'm going to talk to you about the difference between a public adjuster and an attorney. Your insurance claim process is going to be frustrating. It can take time. It's going to require a lot of energy that you don't really have right now, but it is something that you can do. And I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to take that first step. Especially if you're a total loss, I would expect and hope that a large portion of your policy will be given to you in relatively short order. If, however, you run into a problem, if you are just at loggerjams, you got $1 million policy, insurance company says, take 500, we're not giving you a penny more. The question then becomes, what do you do? The insurance company relationship with you is one of the greatest power imbalances that exist in modern times. They've done this hundreds of thousands, millions of times. Most people will only have to do something like this once in their life. So keep that in mind. What most people aren't aware of is that just like the insurance company has an adjuster that comes out and handles the valuation of a claim, there's a profession called a public adjuster, which are the same thing, except they work for you. They work for the homeowner. And these people are typically insurance industry type people. They know the games, they know the software, they know the ins and outs. They know different ways that an insurance company is going to try to seem like they're your friend, but really skate around replacing something because the insurance company knows it's easier to repair it. Public adjusters are very knowledgeable in this area. They typically charge much less than an attorney. And so I always tell people, start with your insurance claim. If you run into problems, hire a public adjuster. My personal opinion is you shouldn't really ever hire an attorney to help you with your insurance claim. The fee that an attorney can charge is high. However, if you've got an attorney coming in, maybe it's a pro bono clinic, maybe they're doing it at a reduced fee just to help you with the claims process. I have nothing against that. But my concern is going back to these opportunists. I have seen ads, I scroll through Instagram, I'm seeing these different things where people are putting this message out. Attorneys apparently are putting this message out that says, oh, sign up for compensation. Click here in 5 minutes, we'll get you an answer. And it seems to me what they're trying to do is get you to hire them to handle your insurance claim. And then they're going to take, a third or 40% of that money. To put it plainly, your insurance money is for you. Your insurance money should help you rebuild. If you need help with the insurance claim, start with a public adjuster. They're going to be a much better resource and, quite frankly, much cheaper resource. The one thing I will say about a public adjuster, if you go down that road, make sure the public adjuster's fee is limited to what they recover for you. So if you're able to negotiate $500,000 from your insurance, and there's another $500,000 outstanding, make sure the fee structure is so that the public adjuster only gets a fee off that additional $500,000 that they secure and not the totality of the policy. I think that's more or less industry standard, but I have seen it go the other way in past fires. So just remember, the goal here is we want you to have as much money as possible from this policy without having to resort to hiring somebody. That's your insurance money. It's for you. Keep that tip in mind. At some point, like I said a while ago, I'm here to litigate. At some point, a claim might reach the point of what we call bad faith. I'm only gonna touch on this. A bad faith claim, typically for first party, is when an insurance company unreasonably delays or denies paying your claim. At that point, an attorney will come in and actually file suit and litigate against the insurance company. That's not really my thing. I know a lot of people who do that, and that's a valuable service, but that's not really where you're going to start. And bad faith isn't necessarily what the average person thinks bad faith is. One of the many common things, unfortunately, is something to the effect of, my property values have been going up year after year, and my insurance company never adjusted my coverage rates. Isn't that like their fault? Aren't they on the hook for something? Unfortunately, not really. The law puts a pretty strong burden on the homeowner to make sure coverage is revisited and updated. Again, I'm not saying that's a totality of circumstances for everyone. If you think there's an issue, contact an attorney, but understand there are some pretty strict guidelines about what might constitute bad faith and what might not. It's not just being mistreated by your insurance company or the perceived mistreatment. So along that vein, the question always comes up, how do I hire an attorney? There's lawsuits being filed presently. There's a lot of attorneys posting, holding seminars, what have you. And I want to talk with you about how to hire an attorney generally, because it can be a confusing and overwhelming process. So it's a three-step approach you're going to have. The first step you want to do is you want to ask them, the person you're interacting with, are you going to be the one to handle my claim? Are you going to be the one to try my case? And what you're trying to figure out, is that person going to be the one you're going to be interacting and building a relationship with? Is that going to be the person that's going to hold your case from beginning to end? Or is that someone that's just looking to get your case and then partner or give it to someone else? Obviously, I think the former is a little bit more attractive. I've heard frustrating stories. People develop these relationships. They like the people they're working with. And then several months down the line, they learn that case is going to a different law firm. And all of a sudden, that relationship is gone and not really fully recreated. So keep that in mind. Good question to ask. The second question to ask is, have you done this before? And can you do this case? People like me, when we litigate, we do so on contingency. That means you don't pay anything. We don't charge anything. There's no bill. But if there's an eventual recovery, we will take a portion of the recovery on the back end. That recovery won't come for several years at least. And so these people have to have the ability to navigate the litigation through those years and survive, be able to fund and pay for the litigation in that interim period before any settlement. You just want to make sure that the person you're talking to will be the one to handle your case and has done these before, just to make sure they're right in the wheelhouse of people that are going to be the best fit for you. And just so I'm clear, I am by no means going to say I am the one or anything like that. There are many of my brothers and sisters out there who are excellent attorneys who can do wonderful work for you. The question then becomes, how do you pick? You've narrowed it down. You've got these choices in front of you. And that's the third step. You go with your gut. You're going to be working with these people for the next several years. You're going to interact with them. You're going to share private and intimate moments with them. You have to make sure you're comfortable with the people you are talking to. So I think if you bring that framework to not just an attorney for this, but an attorney in any situation, you'll be able to sift through the noise of people who might not be the best fit for you. Another common issue that people have is the adjuster revolving door. The insurance companies simply do not have enough adjusters to handle every claim in a timely manner. So what they're going to do is they're going to hire third-party adjusters, independent adjusters. These people are not going to be from the area. They're not going to know the area. You're going to have to work with this person. You're going to have to deal with people who maybe live in a community where they can rebuild a house for $200 a square foot. And so when you start talking about the cost of rebuild in LA, they balk and they move and they get uncomfortable. But what's going to happen is 3 or 4 months from now, that adjuster is going to leave and then another adjuster is going to come on. And then you're going to get an email in the middle, of the night or something. And it says, "Hi, Mr. Smith, my name is John Doe. I just got assigned to your case. Please give me a few days to get up to speed with your file." And that might happen multiple times during the life cycle of your claim. And this is why it's important that every interaction you have with your insurance company is documented. Every phone call needs to be followed up by an email summarizing in your words what you believe was discussed. Not only does that email get added to your insurance file, but that email will allow that subsequent adjuster, when they're reviewing your file, to understand the full scope of what was discussed. Having been through this in litigation, I've seen more insurance files than I care to remember. And there's a stark difference between an adjuster typing in, "Spoke to the client about the roof, said I would revisit the estimate, period." And then you see the email from the client on that same thing, and it's detailing how replacement of this type of roof is completely inadequate, that these shingles, they're going to be mismatched, they're going to be ugly, they're entitled to have replaced what was there before, and that's why the roof needs to be replaced. Keep in mind that is most likely going to happen, and you want to make sure that there isn't a period where you are on a phone trying to explain somebody what somebody else said 3 months prior. A common question I get asked is, what can I do with the insurance money? You actually have some options. Unless you're talking about maybe like a code upgrade or extended replacement coverage issue, that money can be used not just to rebuild, but you can use it to purchase a new home elsewhere. You can rebuild somewhere else. It's not tied one-to-one. If, for example, you get $500,000 on your coverage A, that if you take some of that money and go buy lunch, you're going to be in trouble. That's not really how it works. Once the money is paid out, it's for you. Just do keep in mind, you might have portions of your policy that are withheld pending other things happening, like a rebuild to unlock additional insurance money. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, talk a little bit about what we know. The Palisades fire started January 7th, 10:30. We all know when it started. This is the satellite imagery that I have of what appears to be a pretty early portion on the 7th. You can see the fire up there near the Highlands. And there are some videos floating around on social media about a couple hikers up near Skull Rock who believe to have seen the origin. Overlaying it with the streets, you can see the red line there is the Temescal Ridge hiking trail with Palisades Drive over there in the Highlands. Over 1,200 structures destroyed, 8 fatalities. It was 14% contained last I saw. These numbers obviously are always changing. In terms of the fire's origin, it does not appear that there's any obvious power lines or equipment in the area. The big question is the water, obviously. I do apologize to CBS News. Their logo got cut off of this, but that's where I got this in the interest of full disclosure and giving credit where credit is due. That about 15-ish hours after the fire broke out, the third water tank went dry, and everyone in the community knows about the water issues. The Santa Ynez Reservoir has been under construction and drained since February 2024. It's 117 million gallons capability that was not available. This is LADWP territory. Again, 1,280 structures lost, fatalities, and lawsuits. Lawsuit has been filed, basically alleging this, that the lack of water in the area increased the likelihood of damage, that if there was more water, that some of the damage would have been mitigated or prevented. Let's shift over to the Eaton fire. Here we can see Eaton Canyon, and it's not the best graphic, but we can see here, this is Canyon View Lane, and the tower that we all have seen the photos of where the fire broke out underneath the tower. And I think what's telling from this, from my perspective, is it doesn't appear to be a easily accessible portion. You can see all these hiking trails where everyone hikes down here. Not really easy to get up to where these towers are. So how or why a fire broke out at the base of it is obviously something we're going to be interested in exploring. Started approximately 6:49 January 7th. So on the PM, the same day the Palisades fire. Here is what is suspected to be one of the original photographs of the origin of the fire. Over 2,700 structures lost, 15 fatalities, and lawsuits have been filed. The Palisade lawsuit has named LADWP exclusively, and the lawsuits for the Eaton fire that have been filed have named Southern California Edison. And sorry, when I say P, it's the city of Los Angeles. It's actually LADWP is a municipality controlled utility. And so let's talk about those two lawsuits and what the broad strokes are to understand about what they can accomplish for people who are affected. The core doctrine that we're going to talk about, and again, this is lawsuits from a 50,000-foot view, is the idea of inverse condemnation. And this is essentially a doctrine that, because what people don't realize, or a lot of people don't know until this happens, is these utility companies have a monopoly over an area. And in exchange for their monopoly, they are guaranteed a profit, but they have state oversight and reporting control requirements. And what ends up happening is that there's a doctrine that ends up applying to them for this reason called inverse condemnation. Many people may know what eminent domain is. The government comes and takes your property and they have to give you just compensation. Inverse condemnation is a very similar doctrine. It's based off of eminent domain. And long story short, what it means is that if we can show a utility company started a fire, they are responsible for all of the economic property damage that fire caused. You don't necessarily need to show that they did anything negligent. You just have to show that they caused the fire. So that kind of lawsuit can help cover the difference between what your insurance pays out and what your actual loss is. So again, when it comes time to rebuild, there might be available sources of money from a lawsuit that can help you bridge that gap. Lawsuits also target the damages that typically are not insurable. Emotional damages, fear, anguish, the stress of evacuation, the uncertainty. All of that can be valued in a lawsuit, but you're not really going to be able to find an insurance policy that can do that. Attorney fees, prejudgment interest, potential for punitives. Again, these are all different areas that in litigation could be tapped, that could provide additional sources of money for those who are affected. Similarly, most people don't really have insurance for the work they miss or the lost wages. A lot of this presentation has focused more around homeowners. But keep in mind, if you have a business that was affected by fire, by soot and ash, you might have business interruption insurance, loss of goodwill. Again, check your policy if you have a specific business-related policy, but a lawsuit can help bridge the difference if there's a gap between the policy and your actual loss. And then finally, bad faith. I touched on it before. If there's a situation where the insurance company unreasonably delays or denies your payment, you can contact a bad faith attorney, see if you have a case. I don't see a lot of it personally. I've done it a few times in the past, but it has been an additional source of money. And it has the benefit that if a lawsuit is filed, that settlement or that resolution typically isn't drawn from the policy itself. It's paid out separately. So if that presents itself, just be mindful that option might be out there. So that's about where I'm going to wrap it up. I hope that I covered some of these more broad points that we see day in and day out in this community. A lot of the phone calls I'm fielding right now were used to create this. And I hope that this voice to be put out into all the madness that's happening can help give some clarity and answer some questions about what you're going through, what you're going to experience right now and over the next couple of weeks. And that understand that there are people out there. I'm not alone on this. There's a lot of my brothers and sisters who do this for a living, and we want to see the community taken care of. We want to see you get all your insurance money in as fast as possible. And I hope this has served as some help.
Thank you, Ari. Just a couple of questions. One was about limits for alternative living expenses, if there are time limits to the coverage, and if it differs between a a complete loss versus damage?
Policies will vary. We're talking about insurance from a 50,000-foot view, from a very arm's length view. There are ALE coverage or coverage loss of use coverages that are limited monetarily. There are some that are done by time. It's just going to depend on what's ever written in the policy.
Any advice on how somebody can go about finding a public adjuster if they get to the point to where they think they might need one?
So public adjusters are licensed through the state of California. So anyone that you're out exploring who's a public adjuster, make sure you look them up. You can go to the Department of Insurance website and look them up. Make sure they've been doing this for a while. Make sure they're adequately credentialed. One of the areas that we see a spike in immediately after a disaster is this kind of public adjuster arena. Are people trying to come into a community and offer themselves as willing to assist you with your insurance claim? Do your due diligence. These people are registered with the state of California. You can look them up. So they aren't just someone that's willy-nilly decided, I was just sitting around on my porch and now I'm going to be a public adjuster. That's not how it works.
A question regarding bids. There are contractors that are charging to get a bid. Any comments on that?
Contractors are charging homeowners to come out and do a bid. Wow, when we talk about contractor, are we talking about debris removal? I'm presuming this is going to be like a GC for a remodel. Look, the construction space is going to be ugly. Prices are going to spike. I don't know if this is necessarily referencing a GC to help rebuild, but like with anything, shop around. If you're comfortable paying for a bid, part of the problem is between Eaton and Palisade, there's so many structures that have been destroyed that there's just not going to be enough contractors, not going to be enough work crews, not going to be enough materials to go around as fast as everybody wants them to. How the community responds to that is almost going to be, I almost can't talk about it generally because everyone's different in terms of their risk threshold, their timing of wanting to rebuild, whether they can get permits through. It's going to be a tough process. But right now, I think I'm more focused here today about how do we get through the next 3-4 weeks, the rebuild process. So I didn't really go deep into the rebuild process here because that's something that's going to be 6 months, 12 months from now.
And by the way, there's a note from a public adjuster who says that they are issued a license that looks like an ID. So that is also something that people can ask for to help verify that they're dealing with a legitimate person. Ari, we have a request to discuss some of the firm's experience, specifically representing folks who have been victims of wildfires.
Like I mentioned, I can't really estimate a time for either litigation. When we look back to something like Woolsey, where we had an early indication that a transformer was involved. We have the Palisades fire where the origin right now is unknown, but does not look likely to be attributed to a utility. The theory of recovery, at least from the complaint that I've read, is oriented around this idea that the lack of water affected the firefighters' ability to put out certain fires and the damage could have been mitigated. In Eaton, we have a fire starting underneath an electrical tower, but Edison has maintained prior to the weekend and after the weekend that their grid was de-energized, that tower was de-energized. We've heard conflicting information. There's going to be a lot of investigation, and it would be a little bit irresponsible of me now to speculate how long that investigation might take, what issues might be uncovered. I think there's going to be at least 2 years before we get there. But keep in mind what we've seen in the past when I spoke about inverse condemnation, this idea of showing if an electrical company for the Eaton fire started the fire, or if it can be shown similarly that the lack of water was also a similar taking. That is a judicial determination. That is a motion that gets made. And then if the judge grants it, that utility company becomes liable for all the economic property damage. So my experience is at that point, when we get to that point, or it looks likely that is going to happen, the utility company is going to move all these cases into some type of settlement or mediation.
And I know in the campfire cases, PG&E went into bankruptcy, and so the claims processes were handled through the trustee.
Yeah. And what was the final recovery amount that the camp people got?
So currently, people have recovered 70% of the value of their claims. We expect one final payment to come in the next few months, but it probably won't be more than an additional few percent. And as to timeframes, recall the campfire was in November of 2018.
Yeah.
Folks still haven't received their final payments on that. So these are not quick processes.
And to follow up what Matt said, there's kind of two sides to this coin. There's the point at which the case gets to a process where settlements and mediations can start happening. And then there's another point where that process completes. We might get to the settlement process in 2 years, and that's complete speculation at this point. But then it might be another 2 years or so, or like Matt said, the Woolsey and Camp cases were now 6.5 years down the line, and those are just winding up.
Can you make a comment on how insurance covers smoke damage?
Great question. I spent a little bit of my time oriented around the total loss, just because I know those people are reeling and dealing with a lot of information flying at them from a lot of different directions. Smoke damage is actually, interestingly, can turn into a big fight with the insurance company. And typically what that means is your insurance company is going to come in and say, basically, everything can be cleaned. Don't worry about it. We'll clean it. We'll clean it. We'll clean it. A lot of, soft fabrics can't be cleaned. We can't scrub out that smoke. Smoke is highly corrosive, highly penetrative. It gets into your couch. I don't care how much you run a little wet vac over the top of your couch. If you have bad smoke damage, that couch is toast. So just be prepared. There's many different ways to approach it. Generally speaking, when we talk about exploring the little bit more in-depth items, you would need an industrial hygienist to come out and do some core sampling. If the insurance company hasn't done that, don't just take their word for it that the smoke damage can be cleaned. A lot of times you can't just wipe a wet rag on a wall and expect it to be adequately cleaned. Keep in mind, you're entitled to have your property returned to the condition it was before the fire. So that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways when it comes to partial damage or smoke damage. Again, if you're in that situation, I don't want to go too deep into it because I could talk for another half day about all the different ways I've seen it come up. But just know those two kind of principles. Number one, you're entitled to have your property returned to its condition as it was before. And number two, smoke is highly more invasive and corrosive than your insurance company is going to admit to your face.
A question says, can restoration companies charge for an estimate if a homeowner wants to cash out on the claim? Their adjuster told them to get an estimate for smoke damage cleaning.
I'm not quite sure what the first part of that question is getting at. But yes, you can definitely get a quote from a smoke damage cleaning company. Very common. That's how an insurance company is going to work across different spectrums of a claim, is that they're going to want a quote. They're then going to agree to the quote. They're not just going to let you hire somebody sight unseen and agree to pay that amount. You just have to work with your insurance company on that front. Your insurance company might have someone they recommend. Again, just always investigate, do your due diligence. Make sure that the person you're going with is someone you're comfortable having do that work.
Someone has mentioned that their FEMA application was denied. What I've heard in the press is that there were some errors on the back end that was causing those claims to be denied. So I would encourage you to check again. I do know if you're insured that you need to open a claim with your insurer before you're applying with FEMA, because FEMA will need that information to process your claim.
Yeah, that's exactly right. FEMA is really designed for people who are uninsured. If you have insurance, then the combo is really where you should look to first, is your insurance plus an SBA loan for immediate support.
There's a question, I'll use the terms of art here, so maybe you can define them, but diminution of value versus cost of rebuild.
So that's a lawsuit question. For those who don't know, when it comes to a lawsuit about the damages that you can recover for a loss or damaged structure. And the way it works is you are entitled to the lesser amount between the diminished value or the cost of rebuild. And that's a really good point, Matt. And thank you for bringing that up, because this is one of those tips that everybody needs to be aware of. So like I was saying, you're entitled under the law to the lesser of the diminished value of the property or the cost of rebuild. But there's an exception, and that exception is if you have a genuine desire to rebuild, you can get the cost of rebuild even though it's more than the diminished value. I'm going to save you all the suspense. The cost of rebuild is always greater than the diminished value. So if you have that genuine desire to rebuild, you can get that greater amount in litigation. But what does that mean for you now? It means for you now that you're going through a range of emotions that nobody else knows except people who have been through or who are going through what you're going through. You're going to have moments of doubt, confusion. You're going to have moments of clarity and driving ambition to rebuild, and you're going to have that swing happen up and down over the next several years. Be mindful of making any statement to your insurance company that you don't want to rebuild, that you want to sell the property, because what happens is sometime down the line, I get your file, I'm building your case out for cost of rebuild, and the defendant says, I don't know, he said back in 2025, he wanted to sell the property, so he's not entitled to cost of rebuild because he doesn't have a genuine desire to rebuild. Now, I can deal with that in litigation, that's fine, but you need to be aware of that tension now. Obviously, it's your property. Obviously, it's your choice. You have to do what's right for you and your family, and no one's ever going to judge you negatively for that. Just know that this tension exists, so you're mindful of what you're putting out into the world, and especially to your adjuster.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing in camp where in the months after where entire neighborhoods had disappeared, it was impossible for some people to imagine rebuilding. But as the years went on and people started rebuilding and some sense of normalcy started to come back into the community, people changed their minds. And I think to Ari's point, you don't want to preclude your ability to get access to rebuild funds by making that decision too early. I think the remaining questions we've sufficiently answered. There's one about a class action related to the DWP water cutoff, but I think, Ari, basically you said that's going to require further investigation.
I do want to use that question to talk about something. This does come up. A lot of people call these lawsuits a class action. They're not a class action. They're called a mass action. And the difference is the way I describe it to people. Typically in a class action, everyone in the class was hurt the same way. Citibank overcharges every one of their customers by $1. Everyone in that class is hurt the same way. They've all been overcharged $1. When it comes to these disasters, these wildfires, everyone's damages are different. So you are not going to just be lumped in with hundreds or thousands of other people, and then you get your quote unquote Citibank dollar. Your damages are specific to you. Your damages, your case, it's yours. Now, for expediency, for efficiency, all of these cases in the Eaton fire are most likely going to be coordinated underneath one judge in one courtroom. You can't just have 500, 800 people filing cases and working them through the system individually. It's extraordinarily inefficient. So even though all the plaintiffs will be together in front of one judge in one courtroom, which I suspect will happen, it hasn't happened yet, your case is specific to you. So when we talk about what the case is, it's called a mass action. But just keep in mind, your claim, your case belongs to you. You don't share it with anybody. It's not made stronger because of other people or weaker because of other people. Hopefully that's helpful. But thank you, Matt. That was a great point to bring up. And just one closing remark. We're out here trying to put our voices out to help guide you. Matt and I have been doing wildfire cases for years. I first started getting involved in wildfire cases back in Thomas in 2017. And Matt just resolved all our Woolsey people. Matt, just as he said, wrapped up the camp cases. So you can go check out our website if you want to learn more, not for the purpose of solicitation. There's no rush to join a lawsuit. The lawsuits will be around. Right now, we just want to make sure you're getting some good information to help you through this next month period. Thank you, everyone, for participating. My information is here. If you've got questions, feel free. I've been talking to people nonstop, not necessarily in an attorney-client perspective, but people with insurance questions. My direct email is there. The info@Wisner Baum goes to our team at large, so you can shoot an email there and it'll get directed to the right place if you just have questions about what's going on and what you're going through. We're happy to do whatever we can to be of assistance right now.
It looks like we do have a question from Victor.
Okay, yeah, it's not more of a question. It's just more information for people out there as far as if they decide to go with a public adjuster, that right now, under the state of emergency and still with the evacuations in place or the evacuation orders, that they cannot be approached by public adjusters. That they have to wait until the evacuation is lifted and then an additional 7 days. So be careful with any scams. It's sad to say, but it's there. I just wanted to get that out there.
No, Victor, thank you. That's really good. I don't think I can emphasize enough how much watching these communities, from my perspective, I've seen a really marked increase of the number of people who I have concerns have the community and the people's best interest at heart. So that's great. Thank you for that, Victor.
There is a question about the $770 grant. Can you comment on that?
That's the FEMA money. So we spoke a little bit before about FEMA being for uninsured people. However, I believe that's a $770 grant FEMA gives. That is designed for almost immediate 24, 48 hour support to get you some money for food, emergency supplies, formula, diapers, things like that. And that is available, but you do have to go to the FEMA website to register.
And is it coverage A that covers smoke damage?
It would depend on the policy, but generally, yes, it's going to be drawn off of the portion if you're talking about smoke damage on the dwelling. I want to thank everyone for coming here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ari. That was incredibly informative. And the questions that were asked were very helpful. I think a lot of people have walked away with some good information that can help them start this process. And if there's anything else that you need, if you have any more questions, you want to talk with us, please feel free to reach out. Our information's on the screen. And we're more than happy to spend some time with you and hopefully help make this process a little bit easier in a very difficult situation. So thanks again for coming.